Everyone, I'm Allie Buckman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to be making some beaded beads today and then into a bracelet. And this is going to be the crystal drum bead. It is made as a 4-side bead. We're going to be using some right angle weave and then some embellishment. And you can string this as a bracelet. You can do it as a necklace center bead. I have a bunch of other beads laying here kind of in the same color scheme that I'll make a bunch and then string them up into a necklace. But I'm going to go over with you today how to do this. It's going to be using a number of different materials. The crystals that are used in this crystal drum are our Potomac Rondelles. They're a 3x4 millimeter rondelle, and here in the example I use the champagne color, but I'm going to be using for you the hematite color today. The links for this are going to be over here in the left-hand side if you need to get any of these products. Also in the show more description, there's links to all of these if you need to buy them online, or you can print out a list and take it to your local Potomac Bead Company location. So we have the crystal rondelles, and for each one of this here, you're going to be using 12 crystals for each little ball. I also have 2 colors of 11-0s and 2 colors of 15-0s. In my example here, I just used 1 color of each. I'm going to jazz it up, make it look a little bit more complicated by using 2 colors of the 15-0s. So my 15-0s, I'm going to be using the galvanized silver, or you could use, which would look pretty if you're doing the same colors, you could use the full Labrador. And I also have here the crystal Vitrail, which is a check coating on the Miyuki 15-0 seed bead. So those are my 2 15-0 colors. And then I have the silver lined Capri blue in an 11-0. And then the Opal Gilt lined 11-0 as well. I think they're going to really play up kind of my pewtery crystal color and really make this blue color pop, which is kind of the theme that I'm going for. I also have some wildfire beading thread. This is 0.006 and it is the green color. I have my Threads Up Ultra, or the Threads Up 2 here. We also carry the Ultra and the Bead Alon one. I have my snip pliers here, the slip and snips. And I'm going to be using a size 10 needle. If you feel more comfortable, because we are using 15-0 seed beads, you can use a size 12. That's up to you as long as you're using that thinner size of thread. Again, the links are going to be here on the left-hand side if you need any of these materials. Also a drop-down menu underneath the description here to show more, to give you an idea of what the different materials are that you need to use this pretty little crystal drum bead. So we're going to begin with our little crystal drum here by creating actually 4 units of right angle weave. Those right angle weave are going to be centered by the crystals here that we're creating, and we're going to do 4 right angle weaves and then connect to the top and the bottom. Again, I'm going to be using 2 different colors of 11-0. Here in the example, I just used 1 color in that bronze there. I'm going to be picking up 2 colors. The first colors that I pick up are going to be the outside colors here. So anytime you see a crystal, those are going to be the colors that are near the crystal. The actual little diamond that's created, we're going to switch up colors for that. We're going to start by cutting 24 inches of our beading thread, and I put a stop bead, a bead that's not part of my project, here at the base of my thread, just leaving about a 1-inch tail. The stop bead, if you need help with it, it's just the bead going through 2 times, which is going to show thread on the outside. You're taking your needle away from the extra little piece of thread, and this eventually will come off the project. That's why I used a white bead, because I'm not using that in my actual creation, so that way I remember to take it off. Our pattern again is that right angle weave. It's going to start out simply by adding a crystal and then 2 seed beads. We're going to do that 4 times because 4 beads are going to be part of our right angle unit. So that pattern is always going to be the 2 or the seed bead, the crystal, and then the 2 seed beads. Again, we're going to do that 4 times, making sure we end with the seed beads and then let that all drop down next to the stop bead. Once you have those on, you're actually going to create your right angle unit. If you have trouble with right angle, you can watch one of our other videos to go in depth in kind of a slower version of that. But basically, right angle weave, you're going to be creating a circle. I'm going to go back through my crystal, 2 seed beads, my crystal, and then another seed bead. and that's going to create my first little loop here. Instead of my crystals being on the corner, my seed beads are actually going to be on the corner. I'm going to decorate this before I actually go in and use and add the next right angle unit. So to decorate it, I'm going to create the illusion of corners. To do that, I'm going to be using my 11-0 seed beads, and I'm going to pick those up in my silver color. And I'm going to, after coming out of one of my 11-0 seed beads, go into the next 11-0 after adding a 15 onto my needle. And then I'm going to come out right after it. Pull nice and tight, and that's going to pop that 11-0 right into the corner. When I'm coming out of the second 11-0, I'm going to add my pattern, which my pattern here is going to be what my diamond is in the middle. So I'm going to switch from the silver seed bead, and I'm going to use that Vitrail, and then my blue, and then my Vitrail. So I'm using 15, 11, 15, and I'm going to sew over the next crystal and through the seed bead after. I'm going to force those 3 beads to kind of sit in the middle of my bead. So there you're going to have that design. Next, because I'm on a corner, I'm going to grab a 15-0, sew through that next 11-0 between my crystal, and give a nice tight pull to create the illusion of that second corner. Once I have that there, I'm repeating my 15-0, 11-0 pattern of that Vitrail Capri Vitrail, skipping over the crystal, going into the first of the next 2 11-0 seed beads. I'm going to bend that in so that it kind of sits towards the inside. So you can see those beads there creating a design on the inside. That's how we're going to get that inside look. I'm on the corner again, so a 15-0 goes on through the next 11-0. When I'm coming out next to a crystal, that's always when I'm doing that pattern of my 15, 11, 15, skipping over the seed bead, or over the crystal, and sewing into the first seed bead. So right now, basically, you're going around in this circle of beads. A lot of times, beaded beads are kind of hard to keep track and follow. If you need to, just pause the video and kind of catch up or rewatch it. So again, I have those crystals there in the middle. I'm going to try to force this to the middle so you can see what's happening. And when you look at it here, you have your crystals kind of hanging out there and your beads popping out the side. Don't worry too much if it's not an actual rounded shape. We're going to solve that in a couple minutes. Again, I'm coming out between the 2 11-0s between the crystal, and I'm going to add a 15-0. So through the next 11-0. So anytime you're between the 11-0s, you're going to add a 15-0. When you're next to a crystal, you add the 15, 11, 15. This brings me back to the start. I'm going to sew through the 11 on the other side. So I'm going to go in here, sew through the 11. I don't want to catch the 15 because I want that to be a corner. So I'm going to sew through the 11 and through the next 11 as well, creating that corner. Once I have that corner, I'm trying to do 2 seed beads at a time and it doesn't want to let me go. I'm going to do 1 at a time and come on out. Once I have that last bead there in place, I'm sewing through the 11-0 on both sides, sewing through the first 15-0 and coming out my first of my Capri blue. What I'm going to do then is force all of those Capri blue beads to go to the center of my little right angle unit. When I'm coming out of that Capri blue, I'm going to catch on to all the Capri blue beads. So I'm going to sew around in a circle, catching all of those Capri blue beads. That's going to force those blue beads to sit in a diamond and force them to be in the middle of the project, not along the edges. So I'm sewing through all 4 of them, And then I'm also going to sew back through the original one that I was coming out of. Give a nice tight pull. And you can see there that creates that first little side. And it's also just a pretty little earring that you can create and work with, but that's going to create my right angle unit. So you can see my beads here are not really on the corners. The corners are those 15-0 seed beads, and that's what's going to get this started. We're going to repeat this same thing again. So if you got a little lost, don't worry about it. The main thing to remember is that the 15-0s in your alternate color and your silver are going between the 11-0 on the corners, and then in the middle, when you're next to the crystal, you're going to go adding a 15, 11, 15, and then skip over the crystal to the other side. Where I need to get my needle and thread now, without showing the extra thread, is back coming out of one of my crystals. So I'm currently coming out of that first Capri blue color that I had added on. I'm going to go through the 11-0 next to it, and I'm going to come out my crystal on the other side. Give a nice tight pull, and then I'm going to get ready to create my next little right angle unit. So I'm going to add my 2 11-0 seed beads, my crystal, 2 11-0 seed beads, crystal, 2 11-0 seed beads, crystal, and then I'm going to finish up with 2 11-0 seed beads. So on our first rotation, we did 4 crystals to create this little right angle beaded unit. This time we're only using 3 because we're going to be attaching to the 4th one that's already there. So I let those all drop down next to, and I'm going to go in a rounded circle back through that crystal that I'm coming out of. So I add all of those beads on, and then that's my next right angle unit that I've connected onto. Once I'm through my crystal, you can see I kind of turn it in my hand, that way I can sew away from me. I find that way easier than sewing towards me. I'm going to go and create my corners in my middle. So once I'm coming out of that 11-0 seed bead, and I give a nice tight pull, I'm going to pick up my 15-0s. If it's easier for you, I'll show you a little variation here. You can just add your 15, sew through an 11, crystal 11. This will require a little bit more sewing, but some people it might be easier to keep track of. And right now you're just creating your corner beads. So you're going to come out in between the 11-0 seed beads, adding your corners. This is originally how I had done it, and found that it was easier just to do the middle at the same time, and then I had less thread going through my project. But if you need to do this little step and do one more sewing through, not a big deal. Do it so that it makes sense and it becomes easy for you. So I'm going through the whole way, adding those cornered 15-0s on. So you can see those 15-0s now sitting right in the corner. If you're doing it this way, what you're going to do then is just sew through the 11-0s, not through the 15-0s that you've just added, just the 11-0s. And when you're coming out the 11-0s next to the crystal, that's when you're going to add your 15, 11, 15 pattern. Kind of manipulate your needle and your thread to sew back through those other 11-0s on the corner. Add your 15s and your 11s. So I'm just sewing through just the 11-0 seed beads. So this is the same thing that you did before, but in this step you do the corners first rather than the corners as you're working with it. It's up to you whichever way you feel more comfortable. And again, I'm only sewing through the 2 11-0 seed beads that are already there as part of my right angle base. And then once I come out those 2 11-0 seed beads, that's when I'm adding my alternate color of my 15-0 as well as my 11-0 in the middle. When I come back to the beginning here then, and I have that last little space that I can add my 15-0s in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and actually create that little diamond shape by sewing through those two corners of the original corner. Once I'm through those two, if you have to do one at a time, that's fine. You can see I'm doing one at a time right now. And once I'm through those two, I am going to come up through the 15-0, that Vitrail 15-0, and come out the Capri blue. Circle around then all of those Capri blues. And again, that's going to pull them to the middle. I'm going to go back through the first one as well. Give a nice tight pull, and that pulls so those blue come right in the middle, and then when you're looking at it here, it has that nice sparkle of blue in the middle. I'm going to get to the outside coming out of crystal by going through the next blue, the next 15-0, and sewing down the crystal. Here's where you're going to repeat, going and adding, just like we did the last time, adding your 3 crystals with the 2 11-0s in between, and then creating either your corners and then coming back to create your middle, or creating your corners and your middle at the same time. But we're going to do one more addition. I'm going to do this off screen. I'll let you go back if you need to re-watch kind of how to do that. You can do that and repeat exactly the steps that we did the first or second time. Once you're done with your third set, we're going to do our fourth set, which is then going to join the project together. So the fourth set creates the cube effect here, and it's going to create our last side to our box or our cube. And then when we go through and add the top, that's when it'll become more of a drum shape, because we're going to be kind of adding seams in the corners. To do the last one, we actually have 2 beads already present for our right angle unit. So instead of adding 4 like we did at the start, or 3 like we did at the 2 following little boxes, we're actually only going to be adding 2 beads, because we're going to be using the 2 sides and connecting them together. To do this one, you're going to be connecting by adding 2 11-0 seed beads, and then your crystal, and 2 11-0 seed beads. Take your needle and thread that's coming out of the last crystal here and go through the first crystal, and make sure you're going on the side of it. Skip over that stop bead if you're there. So I'm going on the side, and that's going to pull that in place there and create those 2 corners and add the bead in the middle. Once you're to the other side here, coming out of that last crystal, same deal. 2 seed beads goes on, your crystal, 2 seed beads. You're going to sew then back through the crystal on the other side here. That then creates that box effect. So there you have your box here on the side, and that is creating that 4th corner. Whether or not you want to go in and add the corners and then embellish the middle, that's up to you. I'm going to do all at the same time, so I'm going to sew through one of my seed beads, coming out in the middle here. Between those 2 seed beads, I'm going to corner, go through the second seed bead, add my 15, 11, 15, go through the next seed bead. Remember, always skipping the crystals. Adding my quarter bead. Just kind of push that stop bead there out of the way. You're adding your 3. To the corner here. Add your corner bead. Come out the seed bead and add your 3. When you get back then to the last corner, you're going to add a bead just like you've been doing. Get your last bead there in place. Move that tail out of the way. And then where you want to come out of is just like you've been doing. And I'm going to go through the 11 here on the side. Sew through the other 11. So I'm never sewing back through the crystals, and I'm never sewing back through the 15s on the corners. Yet, I should say, for those. And then we're going to come out the middle in our blue bead and circle around here, catching all of our blue beads. Once you have all of your blue beads here caught, you get your last little diamond shape, and there's your little box created. What we're going to do now is actually join the tops and the bottom of our box. If you wanted to, this would also be a really pretty ring that you could just make it a little bit bigger and wear it just as a ring rather than making it an actual bead. But we're going to go ahead and add the top and the bottom and then seam up our corners so that way it has a little bit more of a rounded effect. So I've gone ahead, since I usually start with a little bit less thread than you, and just tied off my ends, getting them in the same place, tying them off, and then added a new piece of thread with a new stop bead. You want to be coming right out of one of your crystals at the top or bottom of the project. It doesn't really matter which one. And when we're doing that, we're going to repeat the exact same steps that we've been doing, adding the corner bead and then our middles, and then creating that diamond effect in the middle with our blue Capri, that silver line blue Capri. The only difference here is that when I'm on the corners, you see those two 15-O's in the silver popping up. When I add the third, we're going to go around in a circle and seam them up. That's how it's going to create that nice unified ball. Otherwise, what would happen is we'd have those corners all open. If you want to have more of a cube effect, you may want to do that. You can try it out. You can always seam your corners back up after the fact. That's up to you. But I'm going to demonstrate how to do them as you're working with it. So I'm going back in, adding an 11-O seed bead and a 15-O seed bead. Again, I'm coming out one of my crystals. I'm going to sew, after adding the 11 and the 15, back through the other two 15s that are there. And what I mean is that 15 is going to go on. I'm going to sew back through one, through the second, pulling nice and tight, and then through the third that I've just added. So you're just circling your thread up right around those 15-O's. Just the same way that you've been doing the 11-O's when you create that little diamond effect. And you see that creates a little triangle. Next, I'm going to add another 11-O and go through my next crystal. Again, on the corner here, we're going to add an 11 and a 15. Then I'm going to circle around, going to the furthest 15-O, back then to the closer 15-O, and then back out the one that I just put on. So you're sewing through all three of those. Give a nice tight pull, and that's going to create that nice cornered 3-bead effect. On goes another 11. You're just going to go around doing all 4 corners like this. So the 11 goes on, the 15 goes on. Back through the other 15s, the one further away first, towards the bead that you're coming out of. Back through the next 15, and then out through the one that you've just added. Also, if it's easier for you, you can just add the 11, 15, 11, sew through, 11, 15, 11, sew through, and then come back and do the corners. That's up to you. I find this easier because you have a more open space right now to work. After you do your triangle, you put on another 11-O and sew through the next crystal in line. So you can see I've done 3 of those sides, 1, 2, 3, and I'm getting ready to connect that 4th side. Most likely your stop bead is there. You're going to kind of move that out of the way and just pull it out of the way and leave it there. Once you have that last corner in place, then we're going to go back and add our 15-0s in that crystal vitrail and our 11-0s. So that way we can repeat the pattern just like we did on the sides. So each side, so you're basically doing the pattern 6 times, the 4 sides plus the top and the bottom. Only difference is when you do the top and the bottom, you're connecting that triangle there of beads. Once you have that completely finished, and you can see what the bead looks like, you could even stop here if you wanted to have that tubular shape, that's up to you. I'm going to go through now and add my design around the top, just like we did on the sides. So I'm going to sew through my 11-0s here on the corners, come out before the crystal. So I'm not sewing through any 15-0s at this time, just the 11-0s, coming out before the crystal right after the 11-0. On goes my pattern of 3 here, and I sew through then the next 2 11-0s. On goes my pattern of 3, sew through the next 2 corner 11-0s. Again, make sure you don't get that 15-0 in there. If you do, just pull the needle back out like I've done. You want to kind of push those beads to the middle as you're working with them. Pull nice and tight. And it's hard to show with these little tiny detailed beaded beads to get that good focus going on, but I'm sure you guys can see right there as we go. So I'm at my last one here. Adding my beads of 3. Then when I come through here, I'm going to go through my 2 corner 11-0s, through the first 15-0 and the 11-0 that I put on. And then I'm coming out that 11-0 and I'm going to grab around to all the 11-0s in that Capri blue color that are sitting right on the top. Going through all 4 beads, coming out the same bead that my thread's going into. Once you're done that, you can see that circle in the course of the thread, and you're going to do a nice tight pull, and that's going to close that bottom of the box up. Now what we need to do is get to the top of the box. So to get to the top of the box, the first thing I'm going to do is spin around the box here and come out and get rid of my stop bead and my thread. If your stop bead and your thread is on the other side, if you're left-handed or so, you can just leave it there till we get to the end. But I'm going to go ahead and knot this off while I'm here at that side. To do that, what I'm doing is I'm going back through my project, right along the thread line, so that way I don't see any. And I'm going to come out with my needle and thread right next to that stop bead. So I'm circling around so you can't see any thread. I'm also making sure that I'm following the thread lines so that way I'm not changing the shape of my box. Take that stop bead off and I'm going to tie off that little thread end. Like I said, you can wait to do that when you're done, that's up to you. You see I'm doing about 3 knots. Just to get it out of the way because it's kind of driving me nuts, I'm going to take my burner, burn off that extra little thread, keeping just a tiny little piece on so I know where, if you want to glue or burn down the rest, you can do that. Once I have that, I'm going to take my needle and thread and I want to come out one of the crystals at the top. So I'm just going to go right back along the sewing line here. And you can see here it got tangled up, twisted around. Don't worry about that. Usually easy to get out. What I do if I do get a knot is take my needle and force that knot open. And when you work that knot and get it open, then you usually have no problem. A lot of times it's not even a real knot, it's just the end thread kind of twisted around itself. So I'm going to open that back up, and again we're going to get back to the top of our box here, and you want your thread and needle to come out right at one of the crystal beads. When you're coming out the top of the box, you're just going to repeat exactly what I showed you on the underside. You're just going to do an 11-0 and a 15-0. Then circle around furthest away from you, 15-0 on the corner. Coming back and going around in a circle, creating that triangle there of the 15-0s. Giving a nice tight pull to pull that triangle in. Add another 11-0 and sew through the next crystal in line. Once you have all those corners done, we're going to come back and add our 3 beads on the sides of our crystals. So you're adding that 15-0, 11, 15, and then seaming them up there in the middle. So I've gone the whole way around here, adding those corners, and then coming out of the 11-0s, adding the 15, 11, 15. I'm coming out of the first 11-0 that I put on in the Capri blue, and I'm going to go around in a circle, catching all of those 11-0 silver lined Capri blues. Once you're through the first one that you're coming out of, you're going to pull nice and tight and finish up that little crystal drum. And you can see here the beads really kind of stick out, and you can pick what you want to do. If you want to use all 11-0s, you could use all 11-0s for this pattern. You could use 3mm beads. You can really change this up a bit. And what you're going to do to end your thread is, if your thread end or your stop bead is still there, you can connect it and end now. What I'm going to do is just take it back and sew it back through my project a couple times, and then create a half hitch knot or a sewer's knot, going underneath the thread bridge, creating a loop, sewing back through that loop, and catching a knot right there on that corner. I'm going to do that a couple different places, and then I'm going to burn the end of my thread. Because this is a beaded bead and there's a lot of thread going through it, I'm not going to bother to do any glue. I'm just going to take my thread end, and to all the ends that are on here, because I did have to add more, I'm going to take my thread burner. When I use my thread burner, I always push it down so that way it heats up before I touch my thread. Get a nicer thread cut there. You can see that great kind of diamond effect that you're getting. And if you can find the other thread ends, other ones may have gotten tucked in. But once you're done, you're just going to burn down those ends. Right there and there. And then you have your little beaded bead here. So this beaded drum, you can see there's a slight variation in some of the crystal rondelles that we have, and that's going to create just the slightest difference in the shape and texture that you're going to get. So whether or not you're picking, again, 3mm beads, you can kind of really make this a fun kind of variety project, adding those little cubes, creating the more of the drum shape with the smaller beads. You could do all 11-0s. Like I said, you could go around in a circle and create a ring, but what I'm going to be doing is making a couple more and just using basic stringing knowledge, string them together to make a fun spaced out necklace and have those awesome beads be a nice conversational piece. Again, if you need any of these materials for the crystal beaded drum, you can check out the beginning of the video or go down underneath to the details of the video, and to show more, press that little button and it'll give you the links to all of the materials that you need. You can also shop with us at our Potomac Bead Company locations. You can check them out at PotomacBeads.com, and hopefully you get a chance to make some of these awesome little beaded beads. Again, they're a quite easy thing to do. It's just repetitive and kind of keeping track where you are. You can also do different colors, different looks to it. So play around, have fun, and enjoy making the crystal beaded drum.